This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by Intruvix 2 herbicide from FMC. With its fast-burning activity and long-lasting systemic action, Intruvix 2 herbicide delivers consistent pre-seed broadleaf control in cereals. It's fast and it lasts. See your local retailer today.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Hello, you're listening to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio Channel 147, Sirius XM. It is Monday, January 27th, but you're not listening Agronomic Monday with Sean Haney. You're listening to Agronomic Monday with Lyndsey Smith. And that is because we have done a bit of a switcheroo for the next little while. I'm going to be hosting Agronomic Mondays for the next few weeks. Sean is going to take on Tuesdays with Lyndsey, but I'm pretty sure he's going to change the name. You'll have to wait and see what he does with that. But we're going to try it out for a couple weeks. I, of course, still will host the agronomist every Monday night as well. So, switched a few things around with our travel schedules, etc. I am super pumped. Another change for today, but don't worry, he'll be back next week. Peter Johnson, not on today's episode. He is actually traveling. I'm a little jealous about this. He's actually traveling out to the East Coast and will actually be with Sean Haney in Newfoundland this week, which, I'm very jealous, but as we've mentioned, probably, much more jealous is our own Bern Tobin, who is actually from Newfoundland and did not get invited to that one, but that's okay. You can actually hear Pete and Sean on Wednesday's show. That will be recorded in Newfoundland at the event that they're at. So stick around for that one on Wednesday's show. All right, on today's show, though, let's focus, Lyndsey. Let's focus. We've got exciting news out of Manitoba, although it will eventually, of course, be applicable to all of Western Canada if all goes well. But the launch of the Canola Yield Enhancement Network, so that's the YEN, happened last week at Brandon Ag Days. So I've got Jason Casselman with the Canola Council and Brunel Sabourin with Antara Ag joining me in the first segment of today's show to talk all about the pilot project for the Canola YEN and what to expect, how to get involved, etc. A lot to unpack there because, of course, we've seen the Yield Enhancement Network, the Great Lakes Network here in Ontario and into the U.S. There's a maritime YEN. We've also got ones in the UK and other parts of the world. But canola is grown in a very huge region of Canada. It is all Western Canada. So I've got some questions on how, looking forward, how they plan to sort of break this into manageable chunks. We've also got a product spotlight with Tim Gardner on today's show. We've got a corn school with Dan Quinn from Purdue University to talk about fungicide ROI, sulphur, and more. And to round out the show, we'll hear from Clint Jurke with BASF and Amber Bell on determining yield targets for canola and how that works back to profitability. As always, if you've got feedback on today's show, call that listener line 1-855-776-6147 and we'll get those answers to you or chase down a story you might have. All those sorts of good things. All right, let's take a break and I'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
I'm the kind of guy who enjoys his freedom. Sure, I have a wife, kids, and a mortgage. But now I have new on-deck herbicide for wheat and barley. Thanks to a unique combination of actives, it delivers both superior control of tough weeds like kochia and proactive resistance management with, listen to this, complete rotational freedom. You can't tie this wild stallion down. Spray for today, plan for tomorrow with new on-deck herbicide. Visit your retailer or Corteva.ca to learn more.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
If you're serious about agriculture, RealAg's got you covered.
For over 10 years, we've listened to and shared what producers have to say about everything from policy to agronomy from coast to coast.
Keep up with the latest in Canadian agriculture at RealAgriculture.com through daily newsletters, and check out our YouTube channel.
Thanks for joining us in the RealAg community as we continue to cover and serve North American agriculture.
Calling all Montana, Dakotas, and northern Minnesota growers, the new seed Omega-3 canola production system can help you unlock a guaranteed path to market with attractive premium opportunities, first-in-class agronomy support, free on-farm pickup after harvest, and more. To learn more, visit omega3canola.com. Welcome back to Real Ag Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your new host of Agronomy Mondays, Lyndsey Smith. I'm just new to Agronomy Mondays. I'm not new to hosting the show, you guys. But some exciting news out of Manitoba, especially if you're a canola grower. We've got the makings of a canola yen, so a yield enhancement network coming. And so to talk about it, I've got Jason Casselman and Brunel Sabourin. I'm going to talk to you each separately, and then we'll bring you both in. So Jason, you are an agronomy specialist with the Canola Council of Canada. Let's cue this up. Why a canola yen?
Yeah, well, I think for the most part, what we're seeing is the opportunity to capture the genetic potential of the canola crop. And so with a yen or a yield enhancement network, we know there's a number of practices and agronomic decisions that growers are making on their farm that positively or negatively affect their canola yields. And so with a network of growers that the yen can pull together, then we've got an opportunity to measure all of those factors, all those individual components of what goes into growing the crop, and figure out, is there an opportunity to see what are those management factors that can help us capture that genetic yield potential.
Now, Brunel Sabourin, Antara Ag out of Manitoba, you have been tasked with putting together this pilot project, kicking it off. I can't imagine a better choice. Brunel, this will be super easy, won't it?
Oh, it's never easy. Never as easy as we think it's going to be.
That's right. What is Antara going to be sort of putting together to make this yen work?
So Antara Agronomy is a consulting company based out of the Red River Valley, Manitoba, but we put a lot of emphasis on on-farm research and also agronomy benchmarking. So it's one of the reasons I think the Canola Council approached us to run a pilot project to get this initiative off the ground. So we already have a network of growers that are keen on collecting and sharing this kind of data. So it should be a win-win for all groups. So essentially what we're doing is we're going to start off with 30 to 40 fields, I believe, for the pilot project this year. Well, we'll be collecting all of the agronomic data, everything from weather to fertility practices, seeding implements, dates, et cetera, et cetera. We'll be doing a couple of rounds of tissue sampling, as well as collecting some whole plant samples at harvest to do disease assessments, and then looking at the overall yield. And it's all about how do different agronomic decisions that farmers make impact yield at the end of the day, and are there trends or best management practices that we can uncover to make everybody more successful?
So, Jason, to that point, we've seen a yen with wheat. We have our Great Lakes yen. There is a yen project, of course, in the UK. There are some of these sort of popping up in different regions, different, et cetera. So what was sort of the push to get rolling on this in the canola space?
Yeah, I think for the most part, talking with some of our counterparts in Ontario, Megan Moran, she's the canola specialist with the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture. And so some of the successes that she's seen with growers that she works with who grow canola as well as winter wheat, and the opportunity there to see if there's something that we could do with canola. And so in Western Canada, it's a pretty broad geography to try to implement a yen. So that's why we looked at, maybe as a pilot project or for the first year, trying to achieve some success in an area that is manageable, and work with a provider like Antara Ag, who does an awesome job. And so I think it's, to me, it's not only the yield, but it's the what is your potential. So that the attractiveness there is, based on what we get for available moisture as well as accumulated solar radiation, and how well can a grower achieve his potential or the potential of that field. And so to me, it's not a yield contest, more or less an opportunity to see how well growers are able to capture that potential of the hand that they're dealt, basically for the growing season.
So, and that I think is a key part of the yen that we've seen here in Ontario. Now, it's Great Lakes. It is in the States as well. There's growers from a larger region, but Jason, as you mentioned, Western Canada is really more like 6 or 7 regions if you think about it. Although sometimes we lump it together. But Brunel, a key part of a yen is not just, there's awards, yes, for top yield, but there's also that recognition of achieving the top potential or percent of your potential. So to me, though, it does, and like many people, it can seem overwhelming at first to want to get involved in something like this as to how to capture some of this data, some of the work that's done. So how much will a farmer have to do and how much will get done by, say, someone behind the scenes or by your team on the number crunching? What can they expect on that end?
For the growers, it's going to be not much of an extra ask, really, because what we're going to do is a grower will sign up a field. So then we will we'll pick probably a 3-acre or so strip, like enough that we can collect a good yield sample at harvest. But for the farmer, they basically do everything they would normally be doing. They don't treat the field or that strip any different. The biggest ask is at harvest. We ask that they harvest that strip, that we can weigh it off separately by a third party. So that is really the biggest ask, is it might, leaving that strip at harvest time. So it's not a big ask at all, but we're doing all of the data collection, the soil sampling, the tissues, samples, et cetera, et cetera. Ideally, I think a lot of other yen groups, the onus is on the farmer. So he'll either pass that responsibility on to his agronomist, or they work as a group, or certain agronomists will sign up their customers and they'll do all of the data collection. But in this particular case, because we were looking at, okay, how do we guarantee that we have a good sample set, that the data is collected properly? That's where we're involved in it this first year. But it's developing those protocols and then seeing what works best. But to go back to your question, sorry, for the farmer, it really doesn't add a whole lot to their plate, other than at harvest time, we ask that we're there and present when they're harvesting that one strip and that we can weigh it off.
Mm-hmm. And Jason, I'm imagining there were many conversations on all the things to measure, all the things to track. How did that go? How many different sort of parameters are going to be evaluated through a yen?
Yeah, for the most part, it's what's nice is the ADAS group out of the UK does have a bit of a format or an existing template that we can kind of pick and choose and adopt to a spring canola crop. And so working with Brunel and Antara Ag, we were able to determine, what are the normal things that we can collect, and if there's something that's a little bit different that we can see. So it could be up to 40 or 50 different things that happen during the growing season, but it's through the course of the growing season a lot of what an agronomist is typically doing for the grower already, but it's keeping track amongst the growers, and it's the benchmarking of what do those 30 fields, how do they compare, and then being able to sift out what are those things that make the difference at the end of the year.
Brunel, benchmarking is something that you and your company have been focused on for a couple of years now, in that I think to the credit of the agronomists and to the producer groups and to the farmers themselves who are interested in this, I think there's a lot to learn from the benchmarking model. What has been your experience with your clients that have been working on benchmarking now for a couple of years? What are some of the things that farmers can learn from each other?
Well, first and foremost, it's about learning the best ideas from others, or sharing the information to be able to uncover these best management practices. We always challenge participants, to ask themselves 3 basic questions. How good am I? Or it's all about being able to track and measure and try to figure out how good am I? How good could I be? How do I get there? So by looking at your own data, you establish a benchmark to see how good you're doing, and that could be just on the farm comparing different fields of canola, say in a given year. Then how good could I be? That's where it comes in, where you can start comparing yourself against neighbors and peers. And for that, because weather plays such a big variable, and it's been playing a big variable for 10,000 years. And when you look at it, how the soils have formed and topography and all of that, we start with small data versus big data. Benchmarking works really well in a closed environment like a hog barn or a dairy barn or a Walmart. But because we're in the open fields and we're at such a mercy of weather and the variability that's introduced that way, we have to best compare apples to apples. That's where we feel we have to go with a small geography versus a small data before big data is how we've coined it.
Mm-hmm. And Jason, I mean, any conversation about data, often, privacy and anonymity and those sorts of things come up. One of the things I think that's really cool about this project is exactly that. There is still, the protection of the individual's data or numbers, but it does give a way to compare your own farm, your own practices against your peers in a certain region. But that doesn't mean that, everyone gets to see your numbers. You just get to see your own and how you stack up, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's important to have that because, at the end of the day, it's if you are looking at the top 5% versus the bottom 5%, I don't know if I want to see Jason's farm in the bottom 5% all the time and everybody know that. But it is going to happen. There is going to be the opportunity and, where each individual stacks out in or each individual field, then it's like, so these are what the best guys are doing, or this is what the best fields were. How do I make those improvements or make any adjustments to get my field to look like that?
Mm-hmm. Now, one added, and every crop is going to be different. And I understand how you're going to sort of, at least in this pilot, try and deal with regionality. Jason, I'll stick with you for a minute though. I think about wheat. I think about the Ontario example, fusarium is the big disease, but there are a few others. But you mentioned there's that component in the canola side of, potentially testing of residue or soil or last year's crop, et cetera, to try and get the disease profile as far as pressures. Canola just says there are just so many diseases that can come in early in the season, et cetera. How does the Yen plan to try and capture some of the disease pressure that these fields will be under?
Yeah, I think that's part of what we have to figure out for going through the pilot project. And so when it comes to expanding a program like this, if we are successful across Western Canada, is identify some of that regionality and whether it's clubroot areas in Alberta or verticillium stripe in Manitoba. What does that? How does that impact? And whenever you are benchmarking, and so I think if we can kind of look at some of the history of what's been happening on that farm and that field as we seed a canola crop on it, and kind of plan it through. I think a grower at the end of the day makes those decisions as they grow that crop right now, and so it's not going to be a whole lot different for the end. It's going to be, the management, how do growers proactively plan for any of that that might happen in the field.
Now, Brunel, in thinking about the year ahead, getting these growers on site to find these fields, identify these fields, is there an ideal field that you're looking for or an ideal grower that you're looking for? Or is it, if you're keen and willing to do what needs done, you're in? Or what are the parameters around that?
If the grower is keen, that's what we're looking for a variety. We're looking for not just in our immediate area. It will be, being on a floodplain, but no, I wouldn't say that there's any particular things that we're looking for. But on the disease front, we'll be looking at things like field history or how often they've had canola in the rotation, and then also doing disease assessments throughout the season, looking for early season disease and as well as late season. But no, basically, if a grower is interested in joining, we're more than happy to talk to them, and we want a wide variety, and it's not necessarily fields that we're already working on. It could be fields that we're not working on. That the more the merrier, we always feel.
Okay, so Jason, as we wrap up here, for those interested, what's the best way to get in touch? Are they going straight to Brunel? Are they going through the Canola Council, through a rep? How should people get in touch if they want to be part of the Canola Yield Enhancement Network pilot project?
Yeah, so Antara Ag is the going to be the main contact for growers who are interested, and so I think, to me, it's in a pilot year, there's maybe a little bit more control over where we do things and how we do things, and maybe figuring things out. So it's an opportunity that's pretty exciting for us, and looking forward to seeing it be successful, so that if we can, like you say, see something like this happen across Western Canada in those different areas or different geographic zones. If something like that was successful in southern Manitoba, I can't see why it wouldn't work in anywhere else in the prairies.
Mm-hmm. We're going cross-border, everybody. United.
If there's some growers that are interested in signing up, we've set up a scorecard, a bit of a landing page that where growers can express their interest, and we would like to invite any growers of canola that are interested to sign up, and just there's a few questions that need to be answered in terms of where you farm, and that'll help us gauge the interest, and make sure that once we expand the canola yen across Western Canada, as Jason said, that we already have a list of growers that are interested that we can contact. So,
okay.
Though for this year, the project is just going to be within the Red River Valley, but for next year, the year after, depending on the interest, we can see how far it goes or where it goes from there.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's growers in Western Canada interested, sign up and show your interest and get on the list.
Perfect. Okay, so that's a really good point, Brunel, and that is one thing we will do for anyone listening, of course, the radio. Head on over to RealAgriculture.com. We'll have the story up, and we'll link to that page, Brunel. So for anyone who wants to get involved, and even if you're not in the Red River Valley, maybe going forward. So super exciting. I can't wait to see how this all comes together. So Brunel, Jason, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. All right, we'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
Lima Grain Cereal Seed brings you best-in-class performance for winter and spring wheat, including 12 national wheat yield contest winners in 2024. With the most extensive coaxium portfolio and over 15 top-performing varieties, Lima Grain delivers superior genetics to control grassy weeds when you need it, fall or spring. Boost your yield potential today. Visit limagraincerealseeds.com or call your LCS Regional Commercial Manager for more info.
Before you get back in the field this year, spend some time with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Get all the information you need on hybrid selection, planting depth, crop inputs, and more from a wide range of industry experts. A massive library of video content is available on demand when you need it most. Spend your time outside of the field, inside the classroom, with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com.
Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith. And joining me now, it's Tim Gardner. He's the Customer Solutions Agronomist for North Saskatchewan with Bayer, and he is joining me for today's Product Spotlight. Welcome here, Tim.
Hey, thanks, Lyndsey. Great to be on.
All right. Okay, we are, I know it's January. It's late January. And we're a little ways off spring, but it will be here before you know it. And of course, that means it is planting season. And what's really exciting is every year taking a look at new products for consideration. So last year, 2024, you were part of the team to launch Varro FX. This is a herbicide launched in Western Canada last year. How did it perform up to expectations?
Performance actually was, I always want to say meets and exceeds, and it really did exceed expectations, not only from a handling, like how the product just physically handled, to in-field and weed control as well too. So yeah, it did a really good job last year.
Okay. Now, there were, of course, several trials. Were there any unique insights that you pulled from those trials in regards to, say, formulation, tank mixing? What did you learn about this product in the field last year?
You kind of hit both of the two big ones right there. The first one was formulation, and that's the interesting thing with this being a group 2 graminicide, in that it's an EC formulation, which is, they are the best formulations to work with, whether it comes to actually mixing, the actual physical mixing, but also the clean out part of it. But it also leads into really good tank mixability, because we used it with lots of tank mix partners and that. But we found, as far as tank mixing goes, how effective Varro FX actually is with a relatively well-known product like a Buctril M, and how comprehensive of a weed control they have.
Now, so this is spring applied in crop for wheat. Did you find out anything about enhancing its effectiveness in season? Are there any tricks or BMPs we need to know when using this product in the year ahead?
I think the biggest thing with it is that it's a very well built product as far as the components that are within it, both the graminicide and broadleaf component. And it's just a matter of what you match up with it. And it's got a real wide range of products that you can mix with it. And it allows you to also mix, to be very conscious of if you're managing herbicide resistance in one way, shape, or form, or just trying to mix up your modes of action. So it's very open to that.
Mm-hmm. A key part of potentially, if you're not dealing with resistance, maybe avoiding it a little bit longer. Always a key part of that. Now, is there a key list of weeds that you're targeting with this product? Is it quite versatile? What can you tell me about that?
Well, I think it is very versatile, because you can kind of go from what I would call brown soils to dark soils, type of elements that are out there. Certainly kochia is a big one that people pay a lot of attention to, but you can add in partners in that pick up a lot of the, a lot of the other big hitters, like the buckwheats, the cleavers, and all those. So you can put together a pretty good combination to manage whichever spectrum you're having to deal with. So cleavers, very well built product.
Yeah, cleavers are one of my least favorite weeds. So that makes me happy that you can put these things together. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Now, of course, so as we mentioned, starting to finalize those details on what's going in the ground, planning for those herbicide passes. When farmers are sitting down and thinking about this and thinking about, accessing some of these newer products, where can they go for more information? What sort of discussions should they be having with their reps?
I think that if they're going to have a conversation with their local Bayer rep, or even their retails for that matter as well too, is just thinking through what spectrum of weeds they want, because you really can build together a very good recipe with this. The Varro FX as a main component of the graminicide, or the grassy weeds covered, as well as broadleaf, and it's just a matter of how you want to mix and match to put those together. So it's a great foundational layer for your weed control in wheat.
All right, so that is Varro FX. Talk to your local Bayer rep for more information. And Tim, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Yeah, thanks, Lyndsey.
All right, we'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
Co-op knows your community because we live here too. Our teams are your trusted partners with a range of expertise to help support your entire farm operation. And we're giving back. In the past 5 years, Co-op has invested over $1.1 billion in the prairies through building, upgrading, and expanding local facilities. And we've returned over $1.17 billion to Co-op members in the prairies. Co-op, we're all building something for the future. Here for your farm, here for your family. Learn more at coop.crs/farm.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Sean Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on Sirius XM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today. welcome back to Real Ag Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and this segment is brought to you by New Farm. Manage weeds early in your canola, cereals, and pulses with Conquer, Goldwing, Thunderhawk, and Blackhawk EVO. Powered by Duplisan Technology, advancing the unstoppable superpower of pre-seed burn down from New Farm. All right, we head now to Mr. Bern Tobin's report out of SWAC. So this is a recent corn school, also kicking off the year for the corn school. We've got Dan Quinn from Purdue University to talk about return on investment on fungicides and also sulphur. Check it out.
Today I'm at the Southwest Agricultural Conference, University of Guelph Ridgetown campus, and I'm catching up with Dr. Dan Quinn from Purdue University. Dan, how's it going?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, you're up from Purdue, a 5-hour drive, and we're here to talk about, the corn package, managing corn for high yield. And, I guess you started your presentation today about just talking about Purdue and conditions in your neck of the woods last year.
Yeah.
Pretty good year.
Yeah, another state record yield for the state of Indiana. It's kind of been that case, I would say, the last 4 out of 6 years.
Yeah.
Really high yielding areas, state record yields, and pushing above that 200 bushel mark for a state average is really good.
Now, you really talked about the fact that you're kind of settled into that incremental. Yes. Increases these years. Now, 2 bushels a year, which is not bad, but those big bumps are kind of gone. Talk about what we need to do going forward. You talked about, managing genetics, environment, and management.
Yeah, I think, we keep on this trajectory of about 1.8 to 2 bushel per acre per year. We're past the times of the big, scientific discoveries of hybrid corn and chemical fertilizer and stuff like that. So now it's a lot of incremental changes, and a big piece of that is breeding, right? Yeah. So genetics, hybrid selection is so important when it comes to starting that corn off and having high yield potential. But then you also bring in the management side as well, and the way we manage it, and being more efficient in how we manage it, and being better managers can also be another key to maintaining that. And then you bring in the E, right? The environment. That's the one that's always
have that nice timely rain.
Exactly. We can't control it, but Mother Nature always gets hers when it comes to yields and potential throughout the year. So it's something we have to pay attention to.
Yeah. Let's talk management. You've been doing a lot of research the last couple of years. You talked today in your presentation about 22 and 23, some research you did in both of those years. Talk about how you set that up. You looked at a lot of different treatments, a lot of different inputs. Give us a snapshot of the setup.
Yeah, a big piece of this research is, we work with a lot of farmers across the state, and they have a lot of questions of what works, what doesn't. The big question is, how do I get better at yield? And there's so many different products, there's so many different decisions and management decisions they have to make. So we come in and try and look at, okay, what are some of those popular ones, or the ones we get the most question on, and can we look at it from a research trial across a lot of different environments? Right. So we went from Michigan all the way down to Kentucky, throughout Indiana with trials. We had very field scale trials with commercial farm equipment, but looking at a lot of these different inputs and management practices in the same field, replicated in the same environment, and getting a good contrast of, okay, if we add a lot of these management practices, or if we intensively manage this corn, how does that impact yield compared to just, say, status quo? Yeah. And also within that, is there maybe 1, 2, or 3 inputs that are doing all the work? Is there some, we're in much more challenging economic times now than we were in 2022. So you start making those decisions, okay, is there some things we can cut out? So that's another piece of this. Yeah.
So, hey, maybe we'll start there. Let's talk about the intensive first. Yes. I mean, I think over 2 years, basically we were looking at 16 bushels each year for intensive management, a whole bunch of inputs. Great to have big yields, but I think that costs some money.
Costs some money. So in just about every location we did that when we managed the corn intensively, and that's just, additional fertility, something like sulfur, micronutrients. Fungicide is a big piece of that at planting, and also foliar fungicide at tassel, and seeding rates and these different things. When we combine all those, on average, it was about 16, 17 bushel from 2022 to 2023. The flip side of that is when you do everything right, for us it was about $100 per acre more. We had some sites that had really big yield responses where we were able to get that pay in 2022 when corn prices were much better. But across the board, we actually found that it was about break even, or actually losing some money, even though we're still getting that higher yield.
No, Dan, as I say, not a lot of money to be made when you're throwing everything, the kitchen sink, at the crop. But, there were some of those treatments that really, made a difference. And a lot of your focus was on that today, especially that fungicide treatment at R1.
Yeah. And that's, in terms of corn production for the state of Indiana, I think Ontario as well, the last few years we've had a lot of disease. Yeah. Tar spot is a big one. Tar spot is big in Ontario. It's big in Indiana. So our trial years, 2022, even all the way through this year, we've had a lot of disease. Tar spot has been a big, culprit of some of these yield losses we've seen. So you look at R1 fungicide, that tends to be the most consistent fungicide response that we see. Tends to be the best time to apply our fungicides, right at tassel. So that was the input that across the board stood out to us. A lot of times our intensive would be 16 bushel, but the fungicide by itself, without all the extra stuff, was 16 bushel. Yeah. That gives you a good indication of which input was doing all the work.
Yeah, and the key here as well is you talked about management, right? That fungicide, it gives you the late season plant health. It gives you the opportunities to, from a kernel and a kernel weight perspective, that late season engine keeps rolling, right?
Yeah, I think, the big piece that we always talk about is corn yield isn't made at one time. It's made throughout the entire season. And so we have to manage these stresses throughout the entire season. Disease management is a big piece of that. Fertility management is a big piece of that as well. But when we have these foliar diseases like tar spot, they can come in, they basically take over the plant. They occupy all this photosynthetic leaf area with their lesions, and then they basically shut down that plant. Same thing can happen if you're deficient in nitrogen or deficient in nutrients. But what we're trying to do is keep those stresses away, keep that disease away, so that plant can keep being a photosynthetic factory. And when it's able to do that, I always say a corn plant's sole goal in life is to fill its ear and have kernels, and it has to be healthy to do that. So if we're able to maintain that health a little bit later in the season, because we're still making yield later in the season as we get closer to maturity, we're able to tack on a little bit bigger kernels, a little bit heavier kernels, and that's where additional yield can come from.
But the other point you made as well, hey, it's not about just blanket coverage and spraying every acre. You got to be strategic.
Yeah, you have to be strategic, especially when you get into these tougher economic times that we're in. There's a lot of cases that you run into environments where we don't have much disease at all, and something like a fungicide. I always get asked the questions, well, did you have an environment with no disease, and did you see a yield response then? And often the case is no. With this trial, we had a lot of disease in a lot of environments, but there's a lot of cases. We always talk about you got to manage corn throughout the entire year, but you got to pay attention to your corn throughout the entire year. And scouting is still important. Walking those fields, looking at those plants is still important, especially when you get close to tassel, because corn is so sensitive. Look for that disease. Look for tar spot. Listen to the plant pathologists who track it all around the area and say, hey, it's here or it's there. Give you a good indication. And when you're doing those targeted input applications and addressing specific needs in your localized environment, that's when you're going to see the best, more consistent yield response, but also an economic response too.
One other thing that sort of stood out, and it's a kind of a hit and miss thing, we're hearing more and more about it, sulphur. Tell us about that story.
Yeah. So sulphur really in the state of Indiana has become more and more of an issue showing up. You talk about the Clean Air Act, and that's always the big topic with sulphur. We have less sulphur deposition and stuff like that. It's also that, one aspect is that fertilizers are cleaner. We have a little bit less extra sulphur. And then we're also seeing a lot earlier planting too. And then you bring in no-till conditions, soil's a little bit cooler and wetter. So it's kind of a perfect storm of all of these factors where we have really been routinely starting to see sulfur deficiency pop up early on in the season. That tends to be one of the bigger calls I get early on in the season is, hey, why is my corn, striped and looking yellow at this point in time? And it's sulfur. So it's kind of just incrementally increased in terms of deficiency. So it's been a big piece of research that we're trying to understand, when to apply, how to apply it, what rates and stuff like that moving forward.
I guess just to wrap it up, let's go back to that message about, for growers, there's so many decisions that they made, but a lot of that's dependent on being an expert locally and managing your crop in your environment.
Yeah, that's a big piece with, we do these trials and we do them across a lot of locations and stuff like that. But, I tell a lot of folks, nobody knows your fields better than you do. And the way I always look at it is that corn has a certain yield potential when it's put in the ground. And then there's just going to be notches that take off of it. And what's taking off those notches off of that yield is different if I stand here in a field or if I walk 1,000 feet or go to the next county or the next state. It's very different. But if we want to have high yield, we have to understand in a localized environment in your fields and your farm, year in and year out, what is reducing that yield? And then if we know that, we can address them so that we can limit some of that yield reduction. So that's a big piece in understanding, we saw a lot of disease responses, but that may not be the case for everyone. But that was the most prevalent one. So maybe that's one we got to pay attention to a little bit more. And then sulfur, bringing that, maybe we need to pay attention to that a little bit more. But understanding what's limiting yields in your fields and addressing them is really important for maximizing yield.
All right, we're going to leave it there for now. If you want to check out more of our school series, you can head on over to RealAgriculture.com. Top right-hand corner, drop-down list. All our podcasts are there. All our series are there. Or you can just hit cornschool.com into your browser and you'll find them there. All right, let's take a quick break and I'll be back with our last segment of RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, channel 147, Sirius XM.
RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues panel with Kelvin Hefner and Lyndsey Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
I'm Lyndsey Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lyndsey Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern. Welcome back, everybody, to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, channel 147, Sirius XM. It is Monday, January 27th, and that means the time is running out to register for the 2025 Crop Connect Conference. Join us February 12th and 13th at the Victoria Inn and Convention Center in Winnipeg for insightful speakers, crop-specific information, networking, and more. Register today at cropconnectconference.ca. All right, we head now to, it's the first Canola School episode of 2025. Many more to come, of course. Here's a conversation with Clint Jurke with BASF and Amber Bell, of course, with Real Agriculture, talking about setting yield targets and how really the setting of a yield target helps to inform profitability with every decision throughout the growing season. Let's listen.
So let's just jump into the meat of this. What are the average yield targets in Saskatchewan typically? Like, what are people looking for?
It really depends upon your soil zone and where you're farming. Like we know that yields can fluctuate all the way from 20 bushels up to 80 bushels within the province of Saskatchewan and all three prairie provinces really. And so it's what we would like to communicate at the Canola Council is really encouraging growers to think really seriously about what their yield targets potentially could be. What we do know is that oftentimes when we ask farmers what they would like to get in their fields, it's often a lot higher than what they actually do get, and that's no surprise. But there are a number of things that we can do to take a more systematic process in which we can try achieving what we would really like to see in the field.
And so looking at what producers are kind of looking for right now, how does that trend historically? What have they looked for in the past comparatively?
So when we're looking at canola yields, actually we've seen a really nice increase in canola yields right across the country, right from the Red River Valley to the Peace River, of increasing yields right from 2000 up until right around 2016. And now yields have kind of gone flat since then. And so likely what we're looking at is mostly due to weather that yields have increased, but we also do know that farmers have been investing more into their canola crop, investing more into fertility, more into inputs, crop protection products, and that type of thing. And so we have seen a really nice steady increase in yields, but they have plateaued a little bit recently.
Okay, so with that kind of trend, you mentioned that yield targets can be anywhere from 20 to 60, 70.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest factors for whether or not a producer is going to actually meet the targets that they set?
Well, weather is the number one factor, but the number two factors and number three, there are agronomic choices. So when we're looking at canola, crop rotation has a big influence on that. We do know that the tighter the crop rotations get, the lower that the yields do start decreasing. We see a couple of percentage points decrease going from like a 3-year rotation, like a 2-year break from canola, down to a 2-year rotation, like a 1-year break. Crop rotations have a big influence. Fertility programs have a huge influence. And when we look at fertility numbers, we actually are seeing that a lot of farmers maybe aren't fertilizing to what the yield potential of the area potentially could be. Where we are here just outside of Lloydminster, like, it's pretty possible to get a 60 bushel yield. But we do know that a lot of farmers are fertilizing 90 pounds of nitrogen as an example. That only puts you in the 40 bushel range. And so, there is upwards potential, but those additional costs always do bring concerns like financial risk and things like that. So that's the balance that farmers always have to play with.
Mm-hmm. And what would be your recommendation for knowing exactly how much nitrogen you should be putting out on your fields?
Well, step one, and no one likes to hear it for some reason, is to do a soil test, to get a good understanding of what your background fertility is, what you do need to add. And then we do have a lot of tools that are available to us in the ag industry here in Canada that nutrient removal calculators are available, so that if you are getting a 60 bushel yield, you can see exactly how much of that nitrogen you are shipping off of your farm, how much of that potassium that you're shipping off. And so using those numbers and your soil test numbers, and just even looking at what the recommendations are by the soil testing labs, will help you dial in your fertility a lot more. Working with a good agronomist will be a huge advantage as well to helping you determine what is going to be the best fertility rates for your farm. But there are other things as well that can have an influence on, say our yield target is 60 and here in the black soil zone, and we're only getting 50. Well, at the end of the year, it's probably a good idea to take a close look at what took away that yield. What's the gap? Was it just rainfall? Was it too many hot days in July? Or was it some agronomic choices? Was it the fertility program, or did we miss some insects that maybe caused some problems? Was blackleg a problem? This is one of our bigger diseases that consistently takes away yield. Getting some measures and having an understanding of why you did not hit what your yield target is going to help really out with making better decisions going ahead for future years.
Is there a tool available that can help producers figure out exactly where that yield gap is coming into play?
Any tools? Well, Canola Encyclopedia. It has all the information around crop production, but talking to experts, I think, is likely going to be one of the better, having a good agronomist that's going to be able to help you out with understanding what pests are in the field that potentially could be having an impact on your yields and ultimately your profitability, and really looking at that fertility package. I wish there was just a calculator.
But it's something that'll just help figure it out.
That'll do everything.
I guess a big part of that comes down to going out in your field and scouting throughout the season too, right?
Spending time in the field, knowing exactly what's happening is your best investment. And the more you can put your shadow, as one of my colleagues likes to say, your best investment is your shadow. The more you can put that in the field, the better off you're going to be.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned earlier that weather comes into play, that the last few years have kind of changed things because of the weather. So are there strategies that producers can put into play to mitigate some of the adverse effects on what weather will do to yield targets?
Yeah, so that's a $1 million question, isn't it? What can we do to weatherproof your crop? And I'm going to reference a research study that was done a number of years ago by Ag Canada, where they looked at the value of all of the inputs that you can invest in your crop: herbicides, fungicides, fertility, seed, seeding rates. They looked at the whole gamut and tried to determine which one of these components, which one of these inputs provides the most value. And the conclusion was that you need to have all of the values to really maximize your profitability. And so oftentimes, like, we'll have growers we know that we're coming into some adverse conditions. What can I dial back? Should I dial back a little bit on my nitrogen, maybe on my plant population? What came out of this study, and it was a big study, it was multi-year, multi-location, and it showed that when you start cutting back on your inputs, you're cutting back on your profit. So sure, you're cutting your costs, but you're actually taking more money out of your pocket in the end as soon as you start dialing back. So what we learned out of that is that you need to fully invest in your canola crop to really maximize your profitability, even in the adverse years. Like, the yield gap actually got larger for whenever there was stressful conditions, that the profitability actually went up if you had the full package of inputs in stressed years. So how do we weatherproof our crops? It's just following the best management practices. Unfortunately, there isn't any real magic bullet that we can use that's going to fix all of our problems. If we have diseases or insects or anything like that, it's just following all of the best management recommendations, and that is what's going to buffer the weather and the extremes that we see in a growing season.
Right. And how much does things like direct seeding or rotation, much does that come into play when it comes to managing some of the adverse weather conditions? Well,
yeah, so direct seeding, minimum till, zero till, these are long known to be like one of the best things that we can be doing. That's a great way of managing your risk for moisture loss and ensuring that there is moisture, particularly in dry times. So that is definitely one of the best management practices. So yeah, having a diverse crop rotation is as well provides a lot of yield increase. It's good for all crops, like having a 2 or 3 year break in between each crop. It manages diseases. It adds more diversity to in terms of what's happening in the soil. And so yeah, all of these things are part of the best management practices. So if we can follow these, then we're going to have a much more profitable crop.
Okay, so that is a lot of information to take in. It's been really good. Do you have any words of encouragement for producers going into this growing season?
Well, yeah, so we talked a bit about scouting. So spending as much time as you can in the fields to get a good understanding of how your crop is advancing. And so we talk about this in terms of canola, but really any crop. And the better that you know that. And I know that a lot of growers have a lot of land in which to try covering. If you don't have the time to spend time in the field, like, see if you can get some help with it, because really knowing what's happening is going to only help you out with becoming more profitable in the long term.
Well, that does it for this episode of Real Ag Radio here on Rural Radio, channel 147, Sirius XM. I hope you've enjoyed this Agronomy Monday with your new host of Agronomy Monday, Lyndsey Smith. Yes, that's me. Feedback on today's show, or frankly, any of our shows, well, you can send it directly to me, lsmith@realagriculture.com, or shaney@realagriculture.com if you want to get a hold of Sean. And you can always call that Real Ag feedback line, 1-855-776-6147. All right, I will be back with Thursday's Farmer Rapid Fire, so check that out, 4:30 Eastern, every Monday to Friday, right here on Rural Radio, channel 147.
Thank you for downloading this Real Ag Radio podcast, brought to you by Intruvix 2 herbicide from FMC. Intruvix 2 herbicide for cereals delivers outstanding pre-seed control of the toughest broadleaf weeds like kochia, volunteer canola, and narrow-leaved hawksbeard. Be your local retailer today.